Good evening. Welcome to the March 11th, 2019 meeting of the Rutherford County Regional Planning Commission. If you would stand with us, please. Commissioner Chip Pinion will lead us in our prayer and our pledge. Chip.
Let us pray. Father, we thank you for this night that you provided for us to come and gather together and to do the work of the county. Father, we pray that you would give us wisdom, knowledge, and understanding we need to make the best decisions tonight. Father, we pray for good discussion. We pray that you'd just give us those things we need, again, to just do what's best for the county and our citizens as a whole. We also pray tonight for our first responders, those serving in the military. Father, we thank you for their service. We pray for them. We pray for their families. Father, we just thank you for this time tonight. We love you and we thank you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you. You may be seated. Call the roll, please, Gail.
Charlotte P. Here. Chip Pinion. Here. Craig Lynch. Here. David Jones. Here. Jim Averwater. Here. Lee Bogle. Here. Mike Cush. Here. Mike Vaught. Here. Pettis Reed. Here. Rhonda Allen. Here. Jeff Phillips.
Present.
We have quorum.
Thank you, Gail. At this time, we need to approve the minutes for our January 14th, February 11th, and February 25th meetings. I'll call on our Vice Chair, Mike Cush.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In my spare time, I did review those 3 months' worth of meetings, and they seem to be in order, so I would make a motion to approve those. Send them to the archives.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor of that motion to approve, please say aye. Aye. Any opposition? Motion to approve carries. Thank you. No items withdrawn or deferred. Getting into new business, item 6A. All of these are rezoning requests that are scheduled for public hearings. And it seems like we've got a lot of public here tonight, so I'll remind anyone that wishes to speak, our guidelines are 3 minutes. If you need more and want more, you may ask the chair and get permission to speak longer than 3 minutes. Item 6A1, 18-A021, Wayne Miller, location Blackman Road. Commission district is 9. The county commissioner is Joe Gurley. Size of the site is approximately 82 acres. Tax map 71. Existing zoning is RM. Proposed zoning is for a PUD, planned unit development. Doug.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you, and good evening, Commission members. Hope everybody's doing well today. This application, as you recall, was originally considered and approved by this group back in December of actually, I'm sorry, that's a typo. It should be say December 10, 2018 meeting. The pattern book originally proposed a 203-unit residential development on the subject property. 145 were going to be single-family detached, and the remaining 58 would be 2-unit attached. After the Planning Commission's meeting back in December, the applicant's representative met with staff to discuss the possibility of removing the two-unit attached product and building all single-family detached units instead. Staff was supportive of that request, but considering that the change was significant enough, we felt that a rehearing before the Planning Commission would be appropriate before moving it on to the Board of Commissioners. The revised master plan shows a total of 196 single-family homes, which is a reduction of 7 units from the original approval. Minimum lot area would be about 8,800 square feet, minimum home size 1,450 square feet. This development is going to be served by a step system for sewer service. Open spaces are located throughout the development with a formal open space near the center. Really, a lot of that, as you can see here on the plan, has not changed. This concept plan, and this is just for historical purposes, but the concept plan did originally have a small commercial element at the northwest corner of the property where Mike is highlighting there. That was removed and wasn't even considered by the Planning Commission back in December. I just put that out there just for your historical reference. There is a pattern book that is attached on your iPads, so if you want more information, you can look there. The applicant's representative is also present, and he will be speaking momentarily. The proposed street layout is unchanged from the original submittal. There are 2 access points located along Blackman Road. The main entrance will align with Jameson Down Drive to the west. and there's also proposed connection to the Heatherwood subdivision to the east, which we were very supportive of, and then also stub streets both to the north and to the south. There is a traffic study that was submitted with this application. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail with that. That's unchanged. Really, as far as they are dedicating right-of-ways, you can see along Blackman Road to accommodate an eventual 5-lane cross-section for Blackman Road. You can see buffering along that too. I'll get to that in just a minute. But the improvements that they outlined in the original meeting back in December are still valid. Nothing has changed in that particular instance. Landscaping and buffering is not required typically between residential subdivisions, but PUDs are required to have a minimum of 10% open space, half of that being usable, which is defined in our zoning ordinance. The applicant's proposing to save as much as the existing tree line as possible along the edges of the development. They're also proposing a 20-foot evergreen tree buffer along Blackman Road to act as what they call a living wall, as you can see on the concept plan that they have before you. Also, they go into more detail about that later in the pattern book. Performance standards are not an issue since this is a residential development. Overall, staff is comfortable with this request. The proposed change to all single-family detached units, again, being the largest change here. The requirements of the PUD appear to have been met, and with that, we'd recommend approval. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. The applicant's representative is present, and again, we can help answer any questions.
Any questions for staff at this time? Is the applicant available? Evening.
Again, Randy Caldwell with Reagan Smith here representing Goodall Homes. Appreciate again being here tonight. Again, Doug's explained we went through this process the last time were here. We just took out the attached product. It was really kind of a market decision. The applicant, Goodall, went back, had a market study done, and just determined that the market was stronger for the single-family product on this. So actually, we suffered 7-lot total loss on the property. Still have the same commitments that we talked to the last time. Actually, I think since the original meeting, you had some additional conditions that were placed. We built that into the pattern book in anticipation of going to the county commission, so that's all in there as well relative to some of the comments you had at the last meeting. So again, we're here to answer any questions if you have them.
Any questions?
Where's the mail kiosk?
It is in that formal open space in that green area there where the pond is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This time I'll declare a public hearing open for 18-A021 Wayne Miller. Anyone wishing to speak for or against, please come forward. Seeing no one, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Commissioners? We have a motion and a second to approve. Any other discussion or questions? All those in favor of that motion to approve, please say aye. Aye. Any opposition? Motion to approve carries. Thank you. 6A2, 18-A022, Jim Hyson for land venues. Location is Franklin Road, State Highway 96. Commission district is 20. County Commissioner is Trey Gooch. Size of the site is approximately 78 acres. Tax map 100. Existing zoning is RM. Proposed zoning is a planned unit development, PUD. Doug.
Yes, sir. Thank you. This application was also considered by the Planning Commission back in January, just 2 months ago. And the 2019 on that date is actually correct. So again, apologize for that first one. The applicant contacted staff a few days after the meeting to discuss some possible changes, mainly to the road network. The primary change and with the road network, and you've got both the previous plan and the current plan in your agenda on your iPads for comparison. The current plan shows an additional 7 lots, 133 versus 126, but that was as a result of the way that they did the road alignment. They were able to get just a little bit more, a few more lots. Soils for those additional lots will need to be verified through CUD, but it does appear that adequate soils are available. The amount of open space has been reduced by approximately 2 acres, but that amount still complies with the requirements of the zoning ordinance, and it's still, I mean, quite frankly, we still like the design of it. The applicant is proposing to construct construct 133 total now unit residential development on the property. 61 units would be single-family detached. The remaining 72, that number didn't change any. The 72 would be the 4-unit attached product, which you can see, which Mike is highlighting there. I guess that'd be on the east side of the property. Minimum lot area for the detached product is about 6,000, a little over 6,000 square feet. That's mainly those blue ones up front. Those tan ones in the back are, some of those are significantly larger than that. Some of the larger lots being those tan ones being a minimum of 7,150 square feet. Minimum home size would be 2,100 square feet for the detached product and 1,400 for the attached. This development will also utilize a step system. Open spaces are located throughout the development with a neighborhood center located near the front, and Mike's kind of highlighting that there. The back portion of this property, as you can tell, this is only a part of the property that they're looking at. The back portion is still not a part of the plan unit application, so we're still looking at just the front, and really the limits of that have not changed any. They are still showing 2 access points proposed along Franklin Road. The main entrance would be aligned with Royal Glen Boulevard. The second would be right to the east, would be a gated access only for emergency access. The attached and detached products are interconnected within the development, and you see a stub street further to the west on the southern portion of the development, as you can see. There was a neighborhood meeting on this. Originally, there were several concerns that were brought up regarding traffic along Franklin Road. The applicants are aware that should this be approved, that they are going to have to supply a traffic study simultaneously with their preliminary plan application. So this won't be the only chance that we get a crack at the traffic apple, so to speak. Buffering is not required between residential subdivisions like we discussed in the last application, but they are required to have a minimum of 10% open space, with half of that being usable. This site does meet those requirements. Overall, we do feel comfortable with the changes to the development. The density proposed is still consistent with the recommendations of our comprehensive plan. The applicant has made several revisions based on the comments he did receive from the neighbors of this particular property. I will say that we've had some discussions myself with the CUD as well as the applicant. They are asking, as I said a little earlier, for a small increase of about 7 lots. They still need to confirm whether or not they actually have that capacity with the water and with the step system. I'm comfortable moving it forward for just a few lots like that. Originally, if you recall back in December, this was deferred because there was some question about what kind of soil and water availability was there for the entire property. We do know that they can serve 126. There's just some question as to whether those additional 7 lots can be served. If this were to go forward as presented and it turns out that they could only get a handful of those, maybe like 3 or 4 of those lots, the amendments that would be required here, they'd just be losing some lots. That wouldn't be significant enough in my mind to bring it back for consideration. So with that, the applicant is present, and I will also point out that on your table, you have an email from Mr. Scott Hughes regarding some of the concerns that he had. He wasn't going to be able to be at the meeting tonight, but you'll see that he did lay out some concerns regarding the road and drainage and invisibility of this particular development. So I just bring that to you. As I told him, I would make sure that you got a copy of that and would mention that we did receive that. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Questions for staff at this time? Is the applicant available? Please come forward. Evening.
Chairman Phillips, Commissioners, my name is Clyde Rountree with Huddleston Steel Engineering. I'm here representing Mr. Jim Heisen with Land Ventures. And as Doug mentioned, pretty much the same about a density was proposed on this site. We added 7 additional lots. The driving factor was really the road alignment. And after looking at and studying the roads, we were able to reduce the road by about 1,000 feet in order to minimize the impact. There's a lot of topography on the back portion of the site where the previous road was kind of creeping up into that area. So we're able to keep that lower. And that just helped us on a lot of different fronts. So I'm just here to walk you through anything you may have in terms of questions, and would love to respond to anything that comes up in the public hearing.
Clyde, the question I have, on February the 23rd, I spent a lot of time out there in that area. I was somewhat of a gopher for our fire departments and our SORT teams as they were trying to protect the home out there in Royal Glen, dealing with some water that was getting in the garage and all this sort of thing. But on front of this property where Franklin Road was, on up from it, right in there, a lot of water was coming across the road. I don't know if you went out there February the 23rd and looked at this, but coming out of this property down there, I think primarily where you're talking about a dumpster recycling center, and I know you're showing stormwater treatment area on that front part. That lot had a lot of water that Saturday that I was out there, and it was on Highway 96 in that area also, because you had to slow down quite a bit. I would say it was at least probably 8 inches in places.
Breaching Pettis going over the top, 96.
Yeah, it was coming across the highway in that area. Because I went through it several times. I was going back and forth in the Murfreesboro, picking up things, sandbags and things, this and coming back. So quite a bit of water coming from that lot area. And I didn't know if y'all had looked at that and you have plans of what to do in that situation.
I definitely didn't look at it on the 23rd Pettis, but I know typically, with any kind of development, we're always looking at, obviously, drainage study will be performed and the grading plan will be performed. As far as breaching the road, that's probably, we'd have to work with Mike on that to make sure, everything will work. I'm not sure, is it conveying under there? I'm not even sure where it's going at that point.
There are 2 crossings under 96. There's one in this location and then one a little bit farther back here. So, yeah, this is a volume-sensitive area, so we'll have to really pay special attention to this drainage design.
Okay. So the answer is, yeah, we definitely look at that when we get into the site plan portion, but I haven't been out there personally.
Other questions? Thank you. This time I'll declare a public hearing open for item 18-A022, Jim Hyson for land venues. Anyone wishing to speak, please come forward. If you would, name and address. Thank you.
My name is Randy A. Hart. My wife Benita and I have lived in Royal Glen subdivision for about 20 years. We bought our house out there because we liked being a little bit out away from the scuttlebutt and the bad traffic and stuff like that. Beautiful area, property values and so on and so forth. I know there are other people from Royal Glen that have opinions on both sides of this equation, only because I've heard it through their website or Facebook that my wife's on. Traffic, flooding, as they brought up, that happened recently. I feel terrible for some of our neighbors that had to go through that. They may address those issues. But my main issue, among more than anything else, more than traffic, more than access and road, and to get to my house, you turn right on Royal Glen, and I'm the 5th house right there on that road. Right directly across the street where I pull out or pull in is where this will all be and all the traffic. My main concern is if you rezone this from what it is now, then they'll be able to build anything they want there, is what I was told. I was told that when it goes to a planning development, then it won't be just homes. They can put townhomes, they can put other things on there that will directly affect my property values and others that live in Royal Glen. Now, those homes out there typically run somewhere in the $300,000 to maybe up to $500,000-$600,000 range. And so when you're talking about something like that, and my wife and I are retired on a fixed income, what we're depending on more than anything is for our property values to at least stay the same or, continue to increase at what time that we may decide to be able to sell our property or what have you. We're not there yet. I didn't want to sell just yet. We don't want to move yet. We love that area. But that's the part I wanted to address, is not to allow it go into a planning development to where they can put townhomes or other things out there that would directly affect our property values. And anyone that lives out in that area, from what I am told, from what I understand, that will definitely increase the chances of property values going downward. Does anybody have an answer to that for me? Because all I've been doing is asking questions of people about that, and I don't want to see that happen. So I'm not at all, I'm not a tree hugger. I'm not against, development, and I want to see people, be able to prosper and have their business, but I don't want it to affect me in a negative way on our property values. So to change that from single-family homes to whatever they want to put out there would be a direct, hit for me and others at Royal Glen. So that's what I have to say.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Seeing no one, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Commissioners?
I kind of want to reiterate what Commissioner Reed brought up here on that drainage. I also went down 96, and that road is touchy on the best of days, but on this particular day and in heavy rains, it is pretty dangerous. Traffic was having to crawl through there. Royal Glen is a pretty good-sized neighborhood. Mike, is there any, can you give us any update? I know that's a state highway. We don't have a whole lot of say-so over it, but can you give us some update if there's a plan, long-term plan for improving that road?
Long-term, they plan to convert it to a 5-lane road like they have to the east in Murfreesboro, but that date and schedule is yet to be set, I should say. So it's not anything in the near future.
Near term, is there something that we can look at for the drainage, considering that's a safety issue, or does that?
Well, the County Highway Department and I have been looking at possible improvements in Royal Glen and discussing those improvements. But as far as this development, like I was saying earlier, this is a volume-sensitive drainage area, not just a rate-sensitive. So anything that we do on the south side heavily impacts the north side, which is, relies on sinkholes and spillover elevations. So whatever we do over here we have to be very well designed and engineered.
So this is just a rezoning request, and it's already has the zoning as I recall. They just want to increase the number of lots. So when the preliminary plan comes, being sure, I think I know what your answer is, but I want to be sure then the detention ponds and structures will be designed to hold the water back so that it doesn't create such a sudden wash across that road. Is that correct?
Right. We can't contribute to any of the problems on the north side. We have to hold as much or more back on our side, on the south side as we can.
And of course, we don't see any landscaping plan with this. That would become a preliminary plan.
Right, and let me kind of reiterate just a couple things here, just to clarify. Right now, all they've received from the Planning Commission is approval on the original plan. That plan hasn't even gone to the full county commission yet, so the property is still zoned RM. So all they have right now is a recommendation on what they originally that was approved back in January. If for some reason this amendment that they're asking for fails, they can still move forward with what was approved back in January. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear. To answer the gentleman's question who was up here a little bit earlier regarding the plan development, if this is rezoned, they're locked into what they're proposing today, what we went over. There is a townhome element with this, but there's also a single-family element with this. Now, if they decided that they wanted to flip-flop things and build all townhomes, that would have to come back through the process and do what we're doing right now. So it's not a kind of a carte blanche. Once they get approval, they can just do whatever they feel like doing after they get approval. They're locked. This plan that you see right here that Mike brought up on the big screen, this is what they're locked into. Now, we did discuss the possibility that if soils and water didn't quite work out, they may lose a couple lots. That's a minor amendment. I'm not so concerned with that. that. But if they wanted to come in here and do a wholesale change to this, kind of like they're proposing tonight, they changed the road network around, they got more lots. If he decided to scrap the entire single family and go all multifamily, he would have to come back through this whole process, notification and everything, just like the beginning of this did. So I just wanted to make sure that the speaker was aware of that.
If you wanted to come up and make a statement, you're more than welcome to do that. No, the public hearing's closed, I'm sorry. I'll open it back up if you want to come up and speak for a minute.
Again, my concern is that they are allowed to put townhomes and things of that nature instead of family homes in there, which will directly affect the property values all in that area, right where I live. I've asked the question of several people. Now, if somebody has a different answer, please let me know, but I've been told that the likelihood is very, very likely that my property, when this development changes from an RM to this PUD, and they build out there, if there are, a number of those kind of townhomes and things like that out there, that my property values are going to decrease. And anyone that lives in Royal Glen are going to decrease. That's a lot of money to me. So that's my question, is I would like to be able to see them develop where they're approved for now, but not to be able to change it to the PUD to where it even gets more significant. And so that's it. If somebody has an answer for me about that my property values wouldn't go down if this happens, then I'm happy to listen.
Well, and I'll
Otherwise,
go
that's
on.
fine.
I'll just say I'm not an appraiser, so I can't really answer the question. I will say that the plan that they had approved back in January did include those townhome developments. So even if this doesn't go through tonight with the amendment that they're asking for, they can still move forward with the plan that they had, which was really just 7 more single-family lots. So, but again, I'm not a property appraiser, and I'm not qualified to answer that.
But I would like to know the answer to that. If somebody can get, if this committee or board or whatever, I spoke to Mike Hughes earlier today. I came in and asked him some questions, and he suggested I be, come today and be heard if I wanted to be. And I was wondering can I ask you, Mike, about what we discussed today, what your opinion on that is, as far as being in my situation, if you lived in Royal Glen, what your personal feelings would be about this?
Are you talking about?
If you were in my shoes?
The development itself, or the?
Yeah, going from this RM to the PUD.
Well, they don't vote on my opinion, so I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
And let me say, I'll add one thing here, just so you understand. With a planned development, they're locked in, like we said, to the design that you're seeing on that plan, but also to the minimum home sizes and the whatever's in that pattern book, they're locked into that. If this is zoned just a straight RM, which it is right now, somebody can come in and just build whatever they want. There's no limit as far, or there's no, as long as it meets building code. We couldn't hold them to say, well, we'd like to see 2,100 square feet homes and up like we can on the planned development. With this, we don't have that ability to do that with just conventional zoning. So there's a little more surety with this kind of a development as far as what you're going to get, because it's already laid out in the pattern book. You don't get that with a conventional subdivision.
I think the surety that I'm hearing, the consensus is that if it goes to PUD, that my property value is going to drop more.
Well,
and that's my main
I'm not
concern.
saying that, so.
Yeah.
Thank you. Commissioners, let me just add my 2 cents worth. Property values is something that this commission can't consider and won't consider. How do you evaluate that? We don't and we can't. Let me just say that from our history of planned unit developments, we've seen property values in the surrounding area historically go up and not down. The type of homes that are being built are controlled by the plan itself, which means that we can add some assurances as to the type of homes that are being built. Without the PUD, that's already zoned for residential development, and any developer could go in and put in any type of home and any size of home that he would, which may have a greater negative impact upon the surrounding homes. I'm just not saying that property values will go up or go down, but historically, we've seen property values go up around the county when a PUD is approved instead of going down. Commissioners?
Mike, my question's for you. Are the water issues out here significant enough that it would benefit us to have a hydrologist examine what our options are in terms of drainage, or is it just a straightforward issue that wouldn't benefit from that?
Well, any additional evaluations we could get would be helpful. But knowing the situation north of 96, there's only so much we can do on that side. I mean, there's existing conditions that are historic with that area, and I don't know if we can improve. We can do everything and then some on the south side to ensure that we're not increasing the drainage problem on the north side. It flows from the south to the north, but we need to make careful that we don't increase any of the problems to the north.
Chairman, I have a question about tonight's vote. Doug, we are already approved this as a PUD.
Yes, sir.
So tonight, we're just voting on the 7 additional lots.
Well, technically, right. Now, technically, like I said, this zoning hasn't been officially approved yet because it never went to the Board of Commissioners. After the meeting in January, when the developer came in and said, hey, I want to make these changes, I felt they were significant enough that I was not comfortable bringing this to the Board of Commissioners with the change the way they're showing it. I felt this needed another crack at the Planning Commission. So if you're not comfortable with this and you're just comfortable letting him go with what he had, then he'll just move forward with the one that he had because he had approval for that. But I mean, basically, yeah, if you approve, you're approving this application with the new concept plan. So if that's what's done tonight, the current plan that you see on the, well, that's the old one. Yeah, but the, right. But the new plan, if you were to approve this tonight, that plan right there is the one that's going to move forward, the one that's on the screen.
The only difference is the 7 lot addition.
Yes, I mean, there's some other road alignments and the, some of the minimum sizes on the front lots decreased just a little bit, but as far as the number of lots and the road, the number of lots and the road alignment are the two big things.
This is approved tonight. It will not go before the County Commission Thursday.
Correct. It'll go in April, excuse me. Yeah.
There's a site plan up there, Doug, but really it's just a concept plan.
This is concept plan, yes, sir. That's just how they titled it in the pattern book. Yeah, don't let that.
Mike, are you confident when it comes back that I understand the gentleman's concern about his property values, but I'm more concerned about drainage going across that road. Are you confident that this can be engineered in such a way it can take a 10-inch rain and all that water coming off those hills behind it?
I bought a new box of red pens just for this project. So it's, I'm going to look at this very carefully and work with a design engineer and continue to work with the Highway Department on possible fixes on the Royal Glen side. It's going to eat into a lot of the area. Like I said, it's volume sensitive. We're going to have to hold back a large volume of water that we won't allow to cross to the north.
It gives me heartburn. It looks like we're adding on to a problem rather than fixing a problem.
Right.
We could
I mean,
be.
The design, the engineering design of the stormwater system might eat into this development and reduce the size of the step system, of the lots. I mean, there's all kinds of, until we see an actual design, it's up in the air right now. But to answer your question, anything can be done with enough work and hard work and money. But there are a lot of factors. Like I said, the north side, it needs a lot of work. And the highway department's been diligent on making improvements, looking at every avenue of ways to improve on the north side.
I think there's some doable solutions out there for the people in Royal Glen.
I don't know about solutions, but improvements maybe. I don't know if we can, because like I said, that is an area of karst topography, a lot of sinkhole drainage systems where sinkholes will build up and spill over. They're interconnected with the groundwater. When the rivers, creeks and streams are up, the groundwater's up, the sinkholes don't drain. Sometimes they'll even pump out water. So,
What's the first blue line stream that this water will get to after it goes past those sinkholes?
map will catch up with me.
Apologize some because I missed the January meeting because we were out of town, so I'm playing catch up here a little bit.
Looks like this area is trying to migrate to the north, so we're looking at overall Puckett Creek where they come together in this area. But I don't know if, I was thinking there was something over in the Blackman area. Let me turn on. Well, it disappears into a sinkhole. Yeah. That's a disappearing stream. You talking about at the west over? Yes. Right in this area. You have a large drainage basin that crosses and disappears into a large sinkhole here. But what I'm seeing on the map, you're looking at Overall Creek is the first blue line stream that it would get to. But I mean, like I said, it has to build up, spill over several sinkholes to get that way.
What has been in the paper that's coming out there? Do we need to be looking at a larger drainage scheme or look at the overall drainage in that area? I'm just thinking out loud.
As far as continued development in this area, well, this is a difficult area. Like I said, it's karst topography. There's not many receiving surface streams, so we're having to evaluate sinkhole drainage. So if this sinkhole fills up, can't take any more water, where does that water go? We have to look at where it backs up to and then where it spills over and goes to the next depression. So I mean, it's not as easy as draining to a blue line stream or a creek. So it's going to be very challenging.
Hey, Mike, didn't the previous plan have a longer roadway section, which would be, I guess, impervious area, I guess, for the...
Yes, they revised.
Hadn't that been reduced overall in the new plan?
Yes, I believe they had this additional loop in here.
Yeah, so it looks like a significant reduction in
Right.
asphalt there that would probably give it a little bit, I guess when you put roof lines back in there, it may, or roof areas, it may wash a little bit, but
Right.
that gives it a little bit more green space, even with the additional lots. Is that correct?
Well, yes, it will. I mean, it could be a trade-off. We'd have to look at the square footage of impervious area for the roads that they're reduced and then the 7 lots that they're adding, the new, roofs and driveways and whatnot. So, but yes, they did eliminate this section of road here and made an elbow in there. So you've got a TVA easement to contend with. There is no TVA line, but that's what these dash lines indicate here. So the houses would have to sit way far outside of that easement. And then also you've got a Colonial Gas pipeline that runs across this way that is in place.
If there's some reason, Doug, this can't work, when Mike gets his red ink pens going strong, will they have to come back before us again if they have to make any other modifications that, can't
Right,
understand what conceptually it looks to be?
Right. If I'm hearing you correctly, and just make sure I'm understanding what you're saying, if this were approved and we get into the actual preliminary plan and the design and everything like that, if there were changes that had to be made that were significant enough, would it be brought back before you? Is that what you're asking? Yes. The answer to that question is yes. Now, if it's just a matter of maybe they lose a lot or two, we could probably handle that administratively. But if it's a matter of, hey, we need to shift this road over here, or we need to do this and that, well, that's kind of what brought it back before you tonight. So the answer to that question is yes, that would have to happen. And quite frankly, we've had that situation come up before. There was a planned development off of what was Walnut Grove Road, that was approved. And then when they did some more analysis on the soil types and everything, it turned out that there was a lot of unsuitable soil, and they ended up just scrapping the project. So even if it's approved, if we find out that there are issues out there that simply can't be overcome, I mean, that can happen.
So here's a map of the 2010 aerial images 2 days after it quit raining, and you can see the water standing a lot of places over here. So this is a karst terrain. So sinkhole to sinkhole spilled over and built, Typically, normal rain at fall events, the sinkholes can handle the drainage. The groundwater's not high enough to prevent water going in, but heavy rainfall events like the 2010 flood, the historic rain of fall events we had in February of this year and continuing into March of this year, this area just is difficult to drain. I mean, it just is very difficult to drain. That's why I was saying it's a volume sensitive area. We can't send more volume of water across the street. This parcel is right here. The proposed development is in this location here. So these lines on the page are dye tracing. Dr. Ogden at MTSU put dye into sinkholes and detected it in various locations. The dye would go in the red location and come out at a blue location. He detected it in a blue location. So, this disappearing sinkhole goes in here and then comes out at Stewart's Creek over here. This side appears like it's trying to migrate more to the northeast towards Puckett Creek and Overall Creek off this way. You turn off some of these road improvements. Like I said, it's going to be a challenge. I mean, it's not straight up simple designed by any stretch of the means. But like I said, we won't let it progress forward if it doesn't meet our standards. I mean,
Mr. Chair, I'm glad this came back to us a second time for a revision, because I think we're a little wiser than we were last time, and we were able to bring up some issues that perhaps weren't considered or discussed last time. But in light of the fact that I have great confidence in our engineering staff and the local engineers here in town, and seeing what they've done with water, this project has fewer roads in it, which I see as a positive. I think they're going to pay special attention to the detention ponds to try to slow some of that water down. In light of all of that, I'm going to make a motion to approve.
We have a motion and a second to approve, subject to all staff comments. Other questions? All those in favor of the motion to approve, please say aye. Is there any opposition? Motion to approve carries. Thank you. Doug, let me ask you a question. Is the prior approval scheduled to go before the County Commission Thursday night?
No, sir.
Okay. This rezoning request will be held to a public hearing before the full County Commission on Thursday, April the 11th, 6:30 p.m. in this courtroom, along with all of the other public hearings that we have scheduled tonight. Item 6A3, 19-A002, Russell Marino Jr. Location is Franklin Road, Highway 96. Commission district is 20. County Commissioner is Trey Gooch. Size of the site is approximately 25 acres. 4.69 acres are to be rezoned. Tax map is 94. Existing zoning is RM, residential medium density. Proposed zoning is commercial services. Doug?
Yes, sir, thank you. Information provided by the applicant states that they would like to rezone this property to relocate a landscaping business that's currently located in Williamson County. From their application, their business will focus on local beautification and is similar to nearby consumer services such as a neighboring landscaping, pool, and other CS businesses. They only are looking at a portion of this property, a little over 4.5 acres of the site. The remainder of the property would remain zoned RM and may be used for non-retail nursery use, maybe landscape inventory growth, those kind of things. Of course, any use of that remaining property would have to be done in compliance with the zoning ordinance. The applicant does have a concept plan which was included in your agenda packets. They do show 2 access points onto Franklin Road. Now, Franklin Road is a state road, so TDOT approval would need to be made for those entrances. They may only be able to get one. Well, that'll be up to the state how they want to handle that. They also show area for parking, with some being paved and some graveled. The zoning ordinance does require a hard dustless surface for vehicular use areas, but if it's going to be a primarily storage-related area, they can have a gravel base. We'll work with them on that if this gets approved and it progresses to a site plan approval. Verification of any county and state requirements for access and parking, of course, would have to be made during the site plan review, similar to any project we look at. Commercially zoned properties are required to install a Type 2 buffer adjacent to residentially zoned property. There'd be no buffer required along the eastern property line, at least the portion of it that is abutting other commercial services zoned property. Also, any any outdoor storage would have to be appropriately screened as well. Of course, when we look at a site plan, again, should this be approved, they would be required to submit a landscape plan with that as well, so we would confirm conformance to that at that time. And then there's performance standards for noise, dust, odors, hazardous materials, et cetera, that would have to be able to be met. This stretch of Franklin Road, as you can see, Mike's got it up here on the map right now, has become more of a commercialized node over the last several years. There are existing businesses to the east, as well as an event venue for weddings and those type of events. That AR property to the west of the subject property. Yes, that one that Mike has highlighted right there. Franklin Road is identified as an urban-style corridor in our comprehensive plan, which does anticipate non-residential type uses. Overall, we are comfortable with this request and location of it, and we would recommend approval. I'll be happy to answer any questions. I'm not sure if yes, the applicant is present. I see him now.
Any questions for staff at this time? The applicant available? If you would, please come forward. Go ahead.
Hi, Russell Marino, the owner of Willow Branch Landscapes over in Williamson County, looking to relocate the business over to this area just for the 4.69 acres that were highlighted earlier. Looking to expand our business outside of Williamson, over more so into Rutherford County. That's the purpose.
Any questions? Thank you. This time I'll declare the public hearing open for item 19-A002, Russell Marino Jr. Anyone wishing to speak on this rezoning request, please come forward. Seeing no one, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Commissioners? We have a motion and a second to approve item 19-A002. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor of that motion to approve, please say aye. Aye. Any opposition? Motion to approve carries. Thank you. Item 6A4, 19-A003, Chance Lewis for Superior Constructors. Location is Old Nashville Highway. Commission district is 19. County Commission is Steve Irwin. Size of the site is approximately 6 acres. Tax map 70. Existing zoning is RM. Proposed zoning is commercial services. Doug?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. For the board's information, I know we'd had some issues with some of the larger plans on our iPads loading up a little slower, especially in the agenda packets. You'll notice if you go into just where all the documents are, I've taken the concept plan is in the agenda packet, but it's also a standalone file. If you'd feel more comfortable looking at it that way, it might be easier to load it that way, but you'll see it on your iPad. I just wanted to make sure that you were aware of that. Information provided by the applicant states that they are seeking to rezone this property to relocate their current property management business, which is located along West College Street, just a mile or two down the road within the city of Murfreesboro. This business handles a lot of different property maintenance issues such as landscaping, irrigation, concrete drives, patios, those kind of things. The applicant has submitted a concept plan, which I alluded to just a moment ago. The plan does show a 9,600 square foot building along with parking and storage areas. The existing house and other structures on the property would be removed as part of the development of this property. The applicant's concept plan shows access onto Old Nashville Highway. Any new or modified driveways would require County Highway Department approval. This plan also shows area for paved parking as well as a gravel vehicular use area. Again, this is similar to the last application we just considered. Hard dustless surfaces are required for vehicular use areas, but if it's primarily for storage, they can use a gravel base. Again, that would be verified at the time if this is approved of site plan approval. Landscaping and buffering would be required. They'd be required to install a type 2 buffer adjacent to any residentially zoned property. No buffer would be required between this property and I didn't change the address on that, but the property immediately to, I guess that'd be the southeast, which that would be zoned commercial services already as a gravel company located on the property. So that particular line right there would not require any buffering along that. Outdoor storage would have to be appropriately screened, and again, the performance standards for noise, dust, odors, et cetera, would have to be met. There's a variety of zoning and uses along this stretch of Old Nashville Highway. The subject property is adjacent to and diagonal from property which is already zoned commercial services. The old LoJack property, you can see that Mike's highlighting is zoned heavy industrial in that area. And the property is also immediately to the west of an old abandoned quarry, although it's still zoned RM. That property hasn't been used for anything that I'm aware of, although we did consider a zoning request for that a few years in the past. Staff's recommendation for this was for approval. Now, I've received several phone calls about this particular property from some of the residents in the area, as well as I know there's a member here from the Stones River Battlefield that have some concerns regarding the historical value of the property in the area, and I know they do want to speak to that. So I just want to make sure that you are aware that we have received several phone calls with concerns about the historical value of the property and of this area. So with that, I know the applicant is present, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Doug. Any questions for staff at this time? Applicant present. If you would, please come forward.
Good evening, Rob Moulton, SEC. I'm here tonight on behalf of Chance Lewis and Superior Construction. Mr. Lewis is looking at moving his property management company, as Doug alluded to, from West College Street to this site here, looking for a little bit more room for their equipment and their storage of landscape materials and other items in regards to irrigation on that side. They think that this is a good location. They've got, as you can see, one of the adjacent neighbors is the gravel company, which was is rezoned to CS as well as what we're asking for tonight on that side. this site itself has a lot of trees around the periphery, so what the intent is to leave a decent-sized existing buffer of existing landscape material around the periphery, then put a gate, and then put a fence up around the internal portion of the property, so that way they keep their supply materials safe from people on the outside on that side. So if there's any areas along the periphery that do not meet that buffer requirement as per the code, as what we're trying to preserve, we will go ahead and definitely enhance that to meet those qualities of the required buffering system on that side. We'll work with staff to make certain that we fill in the appropriate holes to make certain we've got that out, so that's a point. So like I said, it's a 9,600 square foot building. The front side is about a 20-foot deep office space, so that'll be for more clerical type work. The back side of the building, the remainder of the square footage will be for the maintenance and storage of materials on that side. And then around the outside of that, we're talking about a gravel area for equipment storage, landscape materials, and such like that outside of that. So it's more or less an overall property management company but the front side, we are providing some paid parking that's in relationship to any of the potential customers. Is my understanding right now in regards to how the business functions, they do have very rare occurrences a customer actually come to the office in regards to paying a bill or something like that. So it is a very small amount of vehicular use in regards to people coming to the business. But for the most part, most of the vehicle trips per day will be in the mornings and the evenings as the trucks are leaving and coming back from their doing their tasks for the day on that side. So I'm available for any questions. Mr. Lewis is here as well if you have any questions for him on that side. We were made aware this morning of the potential historical value of this site. We don't know the actual true ramifications of that at this point in time. We're just trying to get an idea as that. I think as Doug alluded to, some of them are here tonight to talk about that. So we'll get some more information, as I'm sure they'll have some comments to make on that side. So I'm available for any questions now or later on. Thank you.
Any questions for the applicant? Stay close. This time I'll declare a public hearing open for item 19-A003 for Superior Constructors. Anyone wishing to speak, please come forward. Name and address.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Commissioners for letting us come up and share some concerns we have about this particular option. My name is Jim Lewis, and I am the Chief Ranger at Stones River National Battlefield. And our entrance on Old Nashville Highway and the Visitor Center is located just southeast on the road 3501 Old Nashville Highway. And just beyond, heading north towards Nashville on the road, is another element of the park, which is the site commemorating the location of General William S. Rosecrance's headquarters during the Battle of Stones River. We have a number of concerns about this property. And of course, we recognize that this property is well outside the boundary of the national park, but it is a location that is important to the story of the Battle of Stones River. The Union line that was set up across guarding the Nashville Pike, starting down by where the park is today and wrapping in a rather large horseshoe shape, actually went beyond Rosecrance's headquarters and around, and it would be that line and soldiers standing on the ground that we're talking about here this evening that would halt a rather successful Confederate attack through most of the day on December 31st, 1862, and changed the battle into one of the most important Union victories of the American Civil War, not the least of which, as far as the importance of that battle, is a victory that would support the Emancipation Proclamation when it went into effect on the middle day of the battle, January 1st, 1863. Perhaps even more importantly than that, though, is that this property in the surrounding area has an opportunity for the park and its partners within the community to share with folks the larger story of the context of the Battle of Stones River. It's not just about guys in blue and gray killing one another. In the end, when the war was over, the institution of slavery was destroyed. And after the war, many formerly enslaved people living here in Murfreesboro and Rutherford County would come together and build a community centered on Stones River National Cemetery. That community would aptly be named Cemetery because of its geographical location, but also many of the members of the community were actually employed working for the National Cemetery at one time or another. Elements of that community exist within the park today, although most of the physical manifestations of that are gone now because of, ironically, the creation of the National Military Park. But in the area surrounding and around this property are actually really the living legacy of Cemetery, the community. There are churches, the Stones River Methodist Church, the Ebenezer Primitive Baptist Church, whose congregations date back to the formation of the cemetery community. There are homes and families who can trace their roots back to the original members of the community itself. And they're in partnership over the last 5 or 6 years with the African American Heritage Society of Rutherford County, Middle Tennessee State University, the Friends of Stones River National Battlefield. Our park has embarked on a long-standing partnership to try to work on learning more about these properties, the community itself, and sharing those stories with the public so that they can understand the connection between what happened 150 plus years ago on that bloody ground around the visitor center and how it still actually has living meaning today for people. And we've already seen some commercial development in this area that is starting to change the sort of residential nature of this corridor. And we feel like that is going to continue to negatively impact the sort of appearance and feeling. And for a park like ours that is kind of becoming a bit of a green oasis and surrounded by development, creating some ability for people who are moving to the park, back and forth between areas of the park, at least some basic sense of place. Particularly in historic corridors like the old Nashville Highway, which was historically the Nashville Pike, or when Wilkinson Pike to the south of us, to try to give people, at least with a little bit of a residential kind of rural character, that they can begin to feel like they're leaving, our vibrant community that is growing so well, and kind of heading back into the past. And so we kind of look at this as another step towards making it harder and harder for us to allow people, particularly as we try to connect the battlefield sites to the cemetery community that exists today outside the park. It's making it very difficult for us to expand on telling that story and share that with the public at large. So I thank you for listening to our concerns.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? If you would state your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening. My name is Leonora Elaine Washington. I am a resident in the cemetery community, and in fact, my property is somewhat adjacent to where the gentleman wants to put his business. I am totally opposed to changing the property to commercial. It has always been residential. In fact, it's like a three-headed sword for me, because I've lived on that property all of my life, and as Mr. Lewis pointed out, it means a lot to the people in that community that are associated with each other, and also what we're trying to do in making things better for the community and the people that visit Rutherford County by working with MTSU and also the Stones River Battlefield. I am very proud to say that I am a descendant of freed slaves, still living on freed slaves' property. The business wouldn't impact me, I don't think, but it's not residential. We have a lot of history there in cemetery community, and cemetery community was organized by freed slaves. My ancestors helped to organize cemetery community, and there are still others. When I received the letter about what was supposedly about the change in property, the zone change, I put the word out, and I've gotten several calls from people out of state that don't live in the cemetery community, but they have relatives that do. They have graveyards that do. There's a church, 2 churches in the cemetery community that are still existing even after the late 1800s. And there's a school in the cemetery community. Of course, it's not active. The school is on my property, and in fact, I own the school. I am the historian of Stones River United Methodist Church. Stones River United Methodist Church is the oldest African-American church in the Tennessee Conference. So those are some of the personal reasons why I object to the zone change. I would like for it to stay residential as it is, and I'm also speaking on behalf of other people formerly from cemetery. Have a nice evening.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'm Chance Lewis, the property owner looking to rezone this property. I've talked with Mrs. Washington and her concerns for the property, and it's something that we'd like to kind of blend in with the community, with what's there now. We begin to clean up. We've probably pulled a couple hundred tires out, several dumpsters of trash, just where the woods have been trashed, and the house that currently sits on the property is it's got a roof falling in. We've had to run people off from staying inside the house. So I think it'd be a nice addition. I mean, we want to work with them any way we can. I talked to her where we lined the backside of her property that we would like to come into our property 30 feet and put a fence up to leave a 30-foot buffer there that lines her property. And the big thing, we've been on West College Street in the area. I love the area, and we want to be a good neighbor and work with them and do anything we can to make an improvement as you're riding by, seeing kind of a trash property with an old house, putting a nice building, and making it look better through there. Does anybody have any more questions?
Thank you.
Excuse me, sir, just a minute. Mike, can you go back to that front picture? We're looking into the road.
The street
on the road.
view?
Yeah, the street view. Yeah, just turn back like you're going that driveway.
This image is from 2015, so it's not a current image, but
All that still, is that foliage and stuff across the front, is it still existing, or have you already taken some of that
All the
out?
foliage is existing on the front. Considering our landscape company, I know it'll come through with the zoning. I mean, we'd like to, our building, similar to West College Street, will have a brick face, and through the front, we'd really like to landscape it nice, because if somebody rides by our office, we want to make it really look good, and you know, so we like to keep it up pretty well in the front. And our current building's located right beside the Rutherford County Rescue Squad building on West College Street.
I'm not necessarily trying to hide the property, but you know, anything to keep the historic look going down, you know, especially if you don't expect to have a bunch of people just drive by and say, oh, there's a landscape company, and I'm going to pull in and talk to them. That sounded initially, that may not be your case necessarily.
Well, we're primarily commercial, so we don't, very rarely do we have clients come to the office. We're either meeting on the job site. I'd say maybe once every quarter we have somebody come in the office. This is basically a place for us to store our equipment, our trucks, and have some office space to do our work. We're just outgrowing our current property on West College Street.
Point being is I'd like to keep it as much of that as possible if, you know, a decision was made tonight to move forward with that, just to keep it, you know.
And us too, I mean, we'd be open to that as far as the vegetation in the front. I mean, as long as we can see to come in and out. I mean, I would be fine with
From a
that.
safety
So the
perspective,
more
yeah.
screening we can keep, you know, the better for us.
I want it to look clean, look good.
Yeah. And I think it's a good use for the property with the old abandoned rock quarry and the gravel company beside it.
What kind of fence are you proposing?
As far as the fence, on the outsides of the property, we probably do a 6-foot chain link fence. As far as the front, we would probably do a 6-foot chain link, the black chain link fence on the front.
Next to this lady, same kind of fence, next to this lady that was up speaking?
Yes, so we could do a privacy fence for her. My thought was on this back, Miss Washington is here, right there. My thought was to come into our property 30 feet, I mean, it's really thick, leave all that vegetation, and then put our fence in there, so that way we'd have a nice, long-term, solid buffer.
So you'd heavy buffer it with vegetation and then the fence.
The thing is, we want to be a good neighbor, we want to blend in, and, you know, we don't want to cause any problems.
Doug, no kind of historical zoning out there, is it?
From the county standpoint, like an overlay zone or something like that? Not from the county standpoint, there's not. I'm not aware of any historical zoning, like an overlay from the city on this property either.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to say that I'll not be voting on this one due to the fact that I am a member of the Friends of Stones River Battlefield, and I just feel it wouldn't be proper for me to do that, as well as the historical, Rutherford County Historical Board, where I do know where there is discussion on the cemetery community that's going through there. So I just want to say that.
Thank you. Evening.
Good afternoon. I'm a little nervous, okay?
If you would speak up.
Oh, okay. My name is Phyllis Williams Lane, and I, too, am a resident. I was born and raised in Cemetery. Although I don't live there now, my heart is there. I was baptized at Ebenezer Primitive Baptist Church. My papa, Mel Malone, owns the property across from the gravel place. For me and my family, we have a strong legacy down there. Everything about us, everything that we have accomplished in our lives today started in cemetery. With the help of the park and other community leaders in cemetery, it is going to be a change. It is going to be an educational piece for younger people to come to learn about the slaves, to learn about the battle, to learn more about, instead of just looking in history books or even going to the Welcome Center, you can actually come and see, feel, touch articles that the slaves used, the slaves' beds that they laid on. This is so important to me and my family and Miss Washington and other families, Afro-American families that have born and raised in cemetery, that I am totally opposed to anything else in that area other than residential. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Sure. If you would, speak into the microphone. Thank you.
I want to make a clarification with the fence. The fence will actually run with the building, so that fence will actually probably be about 110 feet off the roadway. So it won't be like a fence running straight along the road. It'll sit back about 110 feet. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
To us, as Negro American, it's not about a fence that can block the view of the building. It's about the use of the land itself, that it would be destroying the slaves' history, the soldiers' blood that was spilled in the ground. So it's about living legacy. It's not about appearances.
Anyone else wishing to speak for or against this rezoning request? Last chance. I want to declare the public hearing closed. Commissioners?
Doug or Mike, can you show the exploded view of the property and the neighboring property?
Concept plan?
Question.
Right here.
Show the bird's eye view.
Oh, the bird's eye. Yes, sir.
All right. That's the gravel man or whatever right there. And what's the little pizza triangle right to the right of the gravel?
Church.
That's the,
yes.
And then Miss Washington lives right there.
Back here.
Okay. Okay. She has that whole square then where the two houses. Okay, right there. All right. And then is the quarry, what's the property from the quarry wall to Miss Washington? Is that just quarry property?
Yes.
Was this property, do you know, purchased on the open market? Was this advertised for sale? And
I would assume, but I couldn't say for sure one way or the other.
so anybody had a chance to buy this piece of land? Okay.
That is a 1913 plat of the Henderson subdivision, this area over here across the street. Right here. Henderson Farm, I should say. But I think it goes back to the cemetery community as well.
What's the significance of that?
Just the location of the cemetery, if it was part of this, there's a cemetery here, and then the, I guess the Battlefield Cemetery is farther to the south, right here. This National Cemetery here.
Well,
I was just seeing if they were related. And
okay, question for Pettis. Pettis, what's the distance and to the national park and sort of the circumference of the cemetery community? I'm just not aware of that. How big is that community?
this is the National Battlefield Cemetery right here.
That's the cemetery. That's what now?
Battlefield.
That's the National Cemetery right down here, Visitor Center. And you're what, about a mile? Is that what that is? I don't know what your rating is on that map.
The distance between the property in question and the park, is that the cemetery community?
Yes, cemetery is right up above it.
Both sides of the road, or?
Yeah, it was all that area back in there.
Not working again, so sorry.
But when you discuss the battlefield was all over Murfreesboro. If you go all the way to Fireman Sub down here, Battlefield was there. So, I mean, Battlefield was everywhere. But I think what they're talking about is dealing what is close to the park itself and to the cemetery is what the discussion is there.
We're going to try the measuring tool on this site. It usually works pretty well.
Okay, the property is right there. Okay. Just measure it to the green, probably. Right here? Right there? Ish. Yeah. Whoops, you've got to click on that. There you go. Okay. And 1,900 feet, a little bit more, give or take.
Not quite a half a mile.
1,900 feet.
Doug, can we see what other commercial properties are up and down that strip on either side of this property, say from the Battlefield
Yes, sir.
to this property and then to the north?
Okay, the subject property, Mike's got his hand on it right there. Of course, the property immediately adjacent is zone commercial services. If you zoom down in, yeah, there you go. If you zoom in just a little bit, you'll see kind of catty corner from that particular, where his hand is, there's a very small piece of commercially zoned property as well. And then immediately next to that, you'll see the heavy industrial property in that area. And I believe a little further to the west, even outside of that, you've got some, I think that's office. Looks like, yeah, office professional zoning and then a small institutional zone right there. Now, beyond that, I don't think there's really a whole lot if you zoom out just a little bit. Yeah, I mean, as far as at least to 840, you don't see anything else. And going back toward town, there really isn't anything. There's a small commercial neighborhood. I think that's a small little shop right there. Now, when you start getting back into the city of Murfreesboro, that's a whole different ball game right there. But as far as the county is concerned, most of that area is still residentially zoned outside of those parcels that we're looking at right there.
How long's the quarry been there, Doug?
A long time. I don't remember exactly how long.
20,
that's
30,
been
40
there.
years?
Probably, at least.
How long's the gravel man been there?
That was zoned, yeah, that's been since I've been here, so say somewhere around 10, somewhere between 5, 10 years, I'd say.
It's next door.
Yes, sir.
I appreciate all the historic value, but there's commercial already established. And like Pettis said, I mean, the battle was over the whole county. And I don't quite understand the argument whether there's blood spilled on residential land or commercial land. Dirt is dirt, a battle's a battle, a fight's a fight. I'm going to make a motion to approve.
We have a motion. Is there a second to the motion? We have a motion and a second to approve item 19-A003 for Superior Constructors. Other comments?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to the conversation. You know, the emotional arguments are obviously compelling. The problem is that's not in the regulations. We don't get to necessarily factor those in. And the other thing is we have to balance, every application that comes up here, we have to balance the property owner's rights with those of the community. And I don't see a reason in this particular situation, based on the concessions he's already been willing to make, and appearance is the one thing we can offer the community, and that's the reason that we spent some time talking about it with the applicant. That's really my thinking. I mean, you've got a quarry to the back, you've got a gravel company to the side. It is a significant distance. In my mind, I wouldn't have ever correlated this property, you know, with the battlefield. I just don't see where we have the right to basically hold this landowner hostage to not be able to use this property the way he'd intended. So that's my thinking about, you know, it's not an easy place to get to, but a lot of these applications many times are not. So, but that's just my thinking.
Other comments before we vote? Once again, we have a motion and a second to approve the rezoning request for Superior Constructors. All those in favor of that motion to approve, please say aye. Is there any opposition? No. Motion to approve carries. Thank you. Item 6A5, 19-A004, Laws Bolden, location northwest intersection of Joby Jackson Parkway and Butler Drive. Commission district is 18. County Commissioner is Alan McAdoo. Size of the site is approximately 17 acres. Tax map 126. Existing zoning is RM, residential medium density. Proposed zoning is light industrial. Doug?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. In your agenda packets, you have a description that I pretty much copied and pasted from the applicant's application. I'm not going to read all that, but I mean, you can see that on your iPads. I will go ahead and just jump right into the concept plan that was submitted with his application, which again, I'll make the same statement that I made to the previous application. It may open up a little slowly on your iPad in the agenda packet. It is a standalone. You'll see that in there if you'd rather look at it in that way. Of course, similar to any concept plan we look at, this is not a binding plan, but it does give the Planning Commission and ultimately the Board of Commissioners an idea of the direction this development could take. The applicant has submitted other supporting documentation as well, which you can find in your agenda packets. Basically, what the applicant is looking to do is zone this property light industrial for a variety of different uses, be it light industrial type uses or even commercial uses. The applicant's concept plan does show access onto both Joe B. Jackson Parkway and Butler Drive. Access to these streets, should they be annexed into the city of Murfreesboro, the streets themselves, would require city approval, and the reason I bring that up is because the city is actually in the process of annexing several rights-of-way around the county, really for consistency, for fire protection, for emergency response and those kind of things. So I just bring that up really for, just so you understand that. Verification, of any county requirements for access and parking would have to be made through a site plan review process should that application be approved. LI, light industrial zone properties, are required to install a type 3 buffer adjacent to residentially zoned property. Any outdoor storage would have to be appropriately screened as well, and you see the concept plan on the screen before you. And the performance standards would also apply. Generally speaking, this application, what they're asking for, is consistent with the recommendations of the county's comprehensive plan. It's staff's opinion that land around an interstate interchange, such as this, should be used for commercial and/or industrial purposes. That being said, the uses, pretty much all the uses outlined in the applicant's agenda materials that he submitted, could also be accommodated under the county's commercial general designation. The big difference being the self-storage would be allowed only by special exception as opposed to by right under the light industrial. There are some other nuances to the ordinance for that, but as far as what he's proposing, that's the biggest change. The CG designation, and I bring this up again, the city's land use plan, their comprehensive plan, does show this in their 2040 plan as being general commercial in character, and you'll see there's a map included with this. The commercial general would be more consistent with that. Now, that's not saying that you need to base your decision on what the city's comprehensive plan says, but I'm just throwing it all out there for consideration more than anything. The uses he's proposing, the fast food, the convenience market, those type things, those would be allowed by right in either zone. The mini warehouses, again, those would be allowed just by special exception under the commercial general as opposed to light industrial. And the future development area, of course, at this point, not sure really what that will be, so it's difficult to say. But with that, again, staff's comfortable really either direction this goes because, again, the uses that he's proposing could be accommodated in either zone. So with that, the applicant is present. I think they have a brief presentation they'd like to make, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Is there any residential development at all on Butler Road?
Can you zoom in just a little bit? Yeah. I think it might be, once you get past that point right there where kind of Mike is showing, that's all industrial pretty much right there. Then you see the purple, that's light industrial. There's a daycare in that little cutout area right there. And then the remaining area was approved for Kenny Pipe and Supply. Those properties adjacent right to the south, I think there's a house on one of those lots. Let me see. Yeah, there's an existing structure on that. Yeah, that one right there. Not immediately adjacent to the property, but I don't believe I have. Maybe one or two of just general information, but honestly, I might be confusing that with another application, as many as these we get. But you can see there's a few houses down there, a little further to the south, but right there on Butler, but primarily it's once you get past where the daycare is, it's pretty much all industrial type zoning or uses.
Doug, would you want to put the warehouses light industrial and the rest of it commercial general?
Well, I mean, that's a possibility, or something else I was even considering, because you could, break the zoning down. If you wanted to do commercial general for the established uses and light industrial for the rest of the property, that gives them more option for the remaining property. Again, or if you wanted to do light industrial, like you said, for the mini warehouses and the remaining property, and commercial general for those uses that they anticipate, more retail type uses. I mean, I think the applicant may want to speak to that one way or the other, but those are options you do have.
Other questions for staff? The applicant present?
Afternoon, Randy Caldwell again, here representing both Laws Bolden and Danny Wallace, who do have this property under control. And again, going to Doug's point, I certainly know that this area is recognized as not being a residential piece of property. The character of Joe B. Jackson is not that. The character of Butler Road is not that as you move forward to the north there. Certainly, we kind of understand the argument relative to whether this is commercial or light industrial on here. Our preference, or my client's preference, is for this to be zoned light industrial. Gives them a little bit more flexibility as it relates to the unknown user, to the north, and, really just prevents us from having to go before the BZA relative to the self-storage on there as well. But in my presentation, again, just to kind of make the argument a little bit for the industrial portion of the property, if you might go, and I'm going to apologize because I'm going to turn around and face the side. Again, I wanted to show a few things here. Again, as this is zoomed out, you certainly start to see all the industrial uses that are at to the north and also to the east on the other side of the interstate. So that, again, just reinforcing that the character of this area is definitely evolved into an industrial use there. That certainly bears itself out in the zoning. Again, if you might go to the next slide there, Mike. On the left, you see basically the zoning established by the city. To the north is actually heavy industrial uses to the north of us there. And again, to the east, on the other side of the interstate, you also see a mix of heavy industrial and light industrial, and then some commercial there again at the interchange. On the right, again, you see the zoning for the county. The purple area, again, is the Kenny Pipe area that has a light industrial zoning as it already. So again, kind of bears out the character of that area. If you might go to the next slide. Again, Doug has spoken to that he does feel either of those classifications does meet the general land use policy that you have in place with the general urban land use classification. If you might go to the next slide again. Wanted to kind of show this as it relates to the neighborhood again there, and how I think either commercial or industrial is in character. Again, we have the railroad to the west. Again, there's a natural barrier to the residential that is on that side. You can see the Stones River Middle Fork runs along that edge right there. Again, so there's a pretty significant buffer, along there with those two elements there. That again, I don't think that we impact that neighborhood if it is light industrial at the end of the day. And again, just the close proximity to the interchange and the ability of any industrial uses to get in and out of that area with the road network that's been in place with that interchange. If you might go to the next slide again. Again, this just shows the existing characteristics, just zooming in to let you know what's happening with the property. There's a low point basically to the north there. I've identified a couple access points. We know that we do have to work with the city, if we get to site plan stage on this and identifying what the access will be allowed on there, but that basically is based on the concept plan right now. Understanding that may have to change at the end of the day a little bit to meet city requirements. I might go to the next slide again. Again, the soils, we've looked at those. Those are very conducive to septic system there, so we've looked at that as well, so we don't have any issues associated with that. And again, if you might go to the overall plan. And again, I think the main purpose of us wanting the light industrial, again, as I said at the beginning, is to give us some flexibility, because we do not know what the potential use of that 6.1 acres to the north is there. So that gives us some flexibility, a little bit more flexibility to the land uses that we could put on there, and the fact that we wouldn't have to go through BZA. With the self-storage, it's already been identified as an appropriate use for this corridor. Again, we'd prefer to have the whole property zoned as one zoning district if we could, but we'll certainly understand and listen to options that you may feel may be better. So with that, we'll answer any questions that you have after the public hearing, or I can answer any that you might have right now.
Any questions of the applicant?
What are some of the things that can be light industrial that can't be in commercial general?
Well, one of them, the most obvious one is light industrial type uses, which could be anything. Of course, our ordinance identifies uses and categorizes them, so anything that would be considered a light industrial use wouldn't be allowed. But let me just look at our chart here. Let's see. No residential uses really in any of them. Extensive impact facilities, which I don't foresee that really being an issue. Oh, wait a minute. Sorry. Okay. Going the other way. Let's see. Well, automotive parking is allowed by special exception in commercial general, but not in light industrial. Let's see. Transit accommodations like hotels and things like that would be allowed in commercial general, but not in light industrial. Wholesale sales are allowed in light industrial, but not in commercial general. And then again, light industrial type activities are allowed, but not in commercial general. Scrap operations are allowed in light industrial by special exception only. So I wouldn't get too hung up on that. Transport and warehousing type businesses would be allowed in light industrial, but not commercial general. And then agricultural sales and services would be allowed in commercial general, but not in light industrial. Those are the primary changes.
A hotel could not go in there.
Not in light industrial, correct.
Have definite plans for this, or is this all speculative?
I would allow my applicant to, or Laws to probably address that if you might.
Laws Bolden here. Yes, to answer your question here, I guess. Lots of talk, but no definitive plans at this point.
If you would speak up just a little bit, please.
Yes, no definitive plans, lots of talk at this point. We do feel pretty certain that those are the type uses that you'll find along the interstate, and those are who we're pursuing.
Other questions?
So convenience stores allowed in light industrial?
Yes. Yeah, convenience stores, fast food. Like I said, self-storage is allowed in either one. It's only allowed by special exception. They'd have to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals for a commercial general, but they wouldn't have to for light industrial. They'd still be subject to the standards in light industrial, but they don't have to go to the front of the BZA for it.
Thank you. Thank you. This time I'll declare a public hearing open for item 19-A004, Laws Bolden. Anyone wishing to speak, please come forward.
Yeah, this is concerning 2100 Butler Road. I saw on the screen as the gentleman was talking about a daycare. Well, to the south and behind the daycare, it is residential property. It was my grandmother's property, which she's deceased, Sarah Jeton Marble, and my mom, and I have 3 aunts that has property up there, and I also have 3 aunts that lives there, up behind that daycare, up the hill. So there is residential. I don't know how that's going to affect them. I don't live there. I was left some of the property that my mama had before she passed away. So that's my concern. So, I mean, I'm mainly speaking for my aunts because they're up in age and they couldn't be here anyway. So I got to have some kind of news to take back to them to let them know, you know, what's going on. So I guess I'm the minute man, so as we speak. So that's my concern. I just need to know exactly what this is gonna do to them. You know, I see you talking about fast food, all kind of stuff. There's already some kind of warehouse going next to the daycare, which is right down the street and up from where they live. So that's the only concern I have, just what's going to happen to them. You know, they're not going to get blowed off the hill. So I got to tell them something. So if somebody would let me know that.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak for or against this rezoning request, please come forward. Thank you.
How you doing? I would just like to speak on behalf, like my cousin. We have, well, 3 great aunts, and it was my great grandmother. And I would like to know what effect it's going to have on taxes, because they're older, retired. That's our concern, them being put out because they can't afford, the taxes going up. So I would like to know what impact it's going to have on their taxes. What's their outlook? Are they going to have to move, in the future because of what's going on? And because they're right in the middle, just like you said, they're in the middle. It's 3 different residences right there together. And I would like to tell them something. Know something about the future. That's about it. I really appreciate it if you let me know something else. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Seeing no one, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Commissioners?
I have something for Josh. I think the concern, as I heard it correctly, if I heard it correctly, from the folks that spoke, was that they're concerned about gentrification, which would be properties in the area going up and causing the family's taxes to increase. Help me explain to them that this property being rezoned and the tax implication for it is not going to have an immediate impact. It's not going to change the taxes of their family members. The price they pay now is the price that they pay.
That is true. It will not. So as I understand it, the property that your family members own is not the subject of this application, and as a result, it will not be immediately impacted by any change to the zoning designation to the subject property. So that does not mean if the property, for example, that your family owns goes up in value as a result of changes in the area, then it would potentially increase the tax paid on that property, but that may or may not happen. So there's no immediate impact from a rezoning on your family's property for tax purposes.
Thank you, Josh.
Doug, can you explain the different types of buffers between as a light industrial as opposed to a commercial services?
Yes, sir. Commercially zoned property is required to put a type 2 buffer adjacent to residential uses. A industrially zoned property is required a type 3 buffer. Now, I just happened to flip right to that, so that was convenient. A type 2 buffer, the average width of a type 2 buffer is 30 feet with a minimum width of 25 feet, and then there's various plant materials that have to go along with that. If you put a visual, like a solid visual screen, like a privacy fence or a berms, a wall, something like that, you can cut down to the minimum buffer width, which is 15 feet for a type 2. Now, a type 3, again, the average width is 50 feet, and you can go down with a solid visual screen down to 25 feet, and then the associated plantings to go along with that. So anything industrially zoned, you're going to have a thicker buffer than you would be required for a commercially zoned property.
So I like that they actually have better buffering with light industrial than commercial. What about noise and light requirements? Any difference there?
Don't believe so. Let me just double check. Because we have performance standards, but it really is general in the fact that it just says non-residentially zoned property. I don't think it goes, I'm sorry, not too far. Okay, for industrial uses, they're allowed to be a little bit louder, 75 decibels, as opposed to all other uses, which is, depending on time of day, either 60 or 65. So the noise is a little bit different. But again, you have thicker buffers to help offset maybe a little bit of that impact.
I have a little difficulty approving a zone that would allow more than needed against recommendations for the area with no specific plan given. I mean, if the general commercial will work for what they think will be there, I have an issue giving light industrial when there's no plan for light industrial.
Well, and from what I understood, the applicants represented the state, you know, part of the issue, again, is flexibility. I mean, there are more uses allowed, so I understand that. The commercial general would also only allow the mini warehouses by special exception as opposed to by right. So that's just an extra step that they would have to go through. It's not that you can't do it, it's just there's an extra step to go through. The reason I bring up the issue with the city's comprehensive plan is really because they reached out to me and asked me about it, and I told them I would bring it up for consideration, just at least to mention it in the staff report. I mean, I think from a staff standpoint, I mean, we're good with either zone because, I mean, this is right next pretty much to an interstate interchange. I mean, realistically, this is not going to be a residentially zoned or used property, excuse me. So I guess really a lot of it goes back to, would you be more comfortable with commercial general or light industrial, which either of them would meet our comprehensive plan? Again, you know, my job is not to push the city's comprehensive plan. It's really just to say this was concerns that they had, and you can do with it what you will from that point.
Doug, I hate to have to ask this, but adult entertainment falls under which category?
Adult entertainment in either zone is allowed by special exception only, not by right. And even by special exception, or even if it were by right, it would be subject to the standards in the zoning ordinance regarding that use as far as distance requirements and things like that.
I'm going to make a motion to approve the light industrial because of the buffering that it would have from the residential area with staff comments.
We have a motion to approve and a second. Other questions or comments?
I'm just going to make a general statement because typically I'm known for being opposed to speculative rezoning, and that's when a rezoning comes in and we don't know what the purpose is going to be. Probably of any of the ones we've ever seen, I'm the most comfortable with this one because being interstate adjacent, and also the already existing industrial zoning that's around it, I have a very high comfort level with that. And I also know from an economic development standpoint, you're going to attract someone, a business to this site if they don't have to already go through the rezoning process. So I feel like, you know, best case scenario, it would end up as light industrial and we would have an employer there. So to go ahead and do that preemptively, I don't have a problem with it in this very isolated case.
Doug, why again did you bring up the commercial general? Where'd that
sorry?
come from?
I'm sorry, what?
The commercial general, where'd that come from? What made you bring that up as an option?
Well, the city's comprehensive plan shows this area as a commercial general type area, and it could be just a situation where maybe they didn't realize that light industrial will allow those uses as well, but they felt that that would be more in conformance with their comprehensive plan. And so I said, you know, if that's a concern you want me to bring up, I'll be happy to bring it up under our staff review in our comments. But again, I don't think we're in a position that we need to be justifying our decisions by what another plan says. We need to go by our own, which again, ours is good either way.
Other questions? Ready to vote? We have a motion and a second to approve item 19-A004 for Laws Bolden. All those in favor of that motion to approve, please say aye. Any opposition? Motion to approve carries. Thank you. Item 6A6, 19-A005, Robert Stroop, location Lytle Creek Road. Commission district is 6. County Commissioner is Joe Frank Jernigan. Size of the site is approximately 78 acres. Tax map 134. Existing zoning is residential medium density. Proposed zoning is a PUD, planned unit development. Doug?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Just for some historical perspective, a preliminary plat for Section 1 of the Views of Lytle Creek was approved by the Planning Commission back in August of 2006. At the time, the property was zoned R15, which is similar to what is now considered RM. That master plan that they had submitted with that preliminary plat showed a total of 134 lots, 132 of them being residential. That preliminary plat was extended several times over the years, but ultimately the applicant let the project expire, and they're now resubmitting this as a planned unit development. The pattern book for this development has been included on your iPads for your reference. You'll see that the development shows this being divided into 132 residential lots along with stormwater lots and step lots. The minimum lot size is shown to be 10,000 square feet with minimum house sizes at 1,800 square feet. Houses are proposed to be vinyl sided. Sidewalks are being proposed on new streets, and street lights are also proposed along with a centralized mail kiosk, which you can see on the screen. Mike will highlight it there in that area. This plan also does show a significant amount of open space, about 32 acres, which does exceed our 10% requirement. Again, the pattern book has additional information, and the applicant, I'm sure, will have a brief presentation here before too long. Access to each section will be from Lytle Creek Drive. The pattern book states that each house will have a driveway that's a minimum of 16 feet in width and will be able to accommodate at least 2 cars. The applicant has submitted a traffic study with this application. Essentially, what they're showing and the recommendations for this have been included with your agenda packets. I'll kind of just run through those briefly here. Okay, each of the new project access points should be constructed to include 1 lane entering and 1 lane exiting at the intersections of Lytle Creek Road. Analysis conducted for the purposes of this study indicate that dedicated turn lanes are not warranted at this point for Lytle Creek Road at any of the project accesses. It says the through volumes on Lytle Creek Road do not exceed the thresholds that have been established in order to identify when dedicated turn lanes are warranted on 2-lane roads. They do recommend 4-foot shoulders being provided on Lytle Creek Road along the frontage of this site. Now, something I will bring up, and Mike could highlight that area, you'll see on the very southern portion of the property, that particular intersection right there with, I guess that's Couch Road, they are recommending some changes to that intersection, make it more of a T intersection so it's not as awkward. So that is one of the recommendations that is made in the traffic study. And if Mike has additional comments, I'll let him talk about those here in just a second. Screening and buffering is not required between single-family residential subdivisions. Again, there is a significant amount of open space, as you can see on this plan before you, and performance standards are not required to be adhered to, as this is a residential development. Comparing the originally approved plan with the proposed PUD layout, really the number of lots is pretty much the same. Now, whether or not that original design would have ever gone through like that, considering some of the constraints on the property, is questionable, but this design, quite frankly, I like the way that it's been broken up. There is, again, the traffic study recommendations that were made, such as adding the shoulders on Lytle Creek Road, aligning that intersection with Couch Road. I mean, those are benefits to the area. Overall, we're comfortable with the application as far as the layout is concerned, and we do recommend approval. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions. Mike, did you have anything? Mike's got some.
Okay. Let me jump to this area. All right. Few of the things that I have some concerns about. One would mainly be the soils. They do have a lot of hydric soils on the property. They've got Tupelo, Rowan, Egum, more Rowan. So the thicker hydric clays could present some problems for the development, for home construction. I did look at the U.S. Let me see here, the Web Soil Survey, and I evaluated the suitability of dwellings without basements, not looking even at basements, and it said that with the hydric soils, those could limit the suitability of dwellings on this land. So I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's going to be more of a challenge. We're going to have to look at the building stage, engineered footings maybe, looking at some drainage across this property, which is going to be challenging. If I turn off the soils and turn on the contours, this section of property over here is extremely flat. It's like 0.2% across here. Over here, it's less than 0.3%. There is a constructed drainage way through the property, and then an existing stream to the west. Hold on a second. This was most likely a man-made stream to help this area drain here. There are some floodplain issues that we'll have to contend with for a big part of this western section of the property. If my map will catch up. So we do have some flood zone that we have to contend with in this large, flat section of land, and they are proposing to develop this area over here. So it's going to be a double challenge to be in a flood zone and to be having hydric soils and extremely flat. A triple threat. I'm not saying that it's impossible to develop this. It's just going to be very challenging with the hydric soils and flood zone. And then also, Lytle Creek Road has got some sharp turns on it, a couple 90-degree turns until you get farther north, and you still, these are old farm roads that have, developed over time, and a lot of these are 90-degree turns around farms. So those will be a challenge to look at as well. Like I said, it's going to be another box of red pencils on this one.
Same conditions would exist if he developed at RM?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. With the soils that are a challenge, and the suitability of dwellings. This red is very limited, is what they're calling for, because of the soil types. And this comes from the USDA Web Soil Survey.
Mike, would this be similar to what we looked at on Walnut Grove Road that was eventually pulled? Yes. Had a little bit of good step system, suitable dirt, and then a lot of it's going to have to be excavated out and shot rock put in. Right. Is that right here?
Yes, sir. And like I said, they're going to have probably going to need some engineered footings elevated in this flood zone, engineered footings on this other side as well. And we'll have to diligently look at the drainage network to make sure, because it's so flat, because it's got hydric soils, it's going to be a challenge.
Other questions for staff?
Yes. And another challenge is the detention system in the floodplain. So it's got to function with the Lytle Creek up at its flood stage, and it's got to function with the receiving stream elevated. So that's going to be a challenge as well.
So how realistic is this plan currently?
I could see losing a lot of lots because wherever they fill, they've got to compensate a cut somewhere. And I mean, they could do it in the open space, but you're talking about.
In other words, what you're saying, when you steal some floodplain, you got to put some back?
Yes, right. So we don't lose our volume. So let me turn on the flood zone again. Like I said, this is extremely flat. This is over close to 1,000 feet across here, and there's 2 foot of fall, and 1,000 feet. So it's flat as a tabletop, and so you've got a base flood elevation, say, of 658, and you're sitting on top of, as soon as it'll label, a 656. So you'll have to fill 1 foot above that. So you'll need 3 feet of fill across here, right in this area, to build the houses on. And then you'll have to rob Peter to pay Paul to excavate somewhere else so we don't lose that volume. Yes, on the western side. And then as straight as this is, I would say that was a man-made drainage channel through here to help drain this area. Like I said, I'm not saying it's impossible. It's going to be difficult,
Other questions at this time? Applicant available? Please come forward.
Good evening again, Rob Mulchin, SEC, on behalf of Mr. Stroop. I think in regards, if you look at the original plan versus the plan today, I think it's an improvement in regards to the development of the property. The original plan, as Doug alluded to, had 132 buildable lots. We're at the same number, 132 buildable lots. But the difference between the plan from 2006 and the plan today is the amount of open space we're incorporating into the plan itself. We've increased the open space by 32 acres, more or less, in regards to the property. So if you take and back out the step system and the detention areas that we're planning for this, you're still at 20% open space to go on top of that. So overall, it's 40% open space, but when you back out the detention and step barriers, you're down to 20% open space, so more than double what the county requires from an open space standpoint. The part of the open space program that we're planning on that is, as Mike talked about, is the compensation cut and fill for us in the floodplain. The cut and say, Mike said we had to cut to raise something and raise when you lower on that side. So that's the open space is used for on that side. So we'll be looking at utilizing that material in the floodplain to raise the building pads up, to allow us to get those elevations and those minimum pad elevations above flood stages at that point in time. And with the other areas in regards to open space, or to more or less the preserve a 60-foot buffer around those man-made creeks that run through the property on that side. So more or less what we've done is taken this from an RS-15 or RM-15 subdivision layout to an R10 subdivision layout. Thus by shrinking the amount of the size of the buildable lots has opened us up for a amount of open space that will help us with our compensation for cut and fill in regards to the getting the pad elevations above that. I know Mike has done some extensive work, as it seems, in regards to the hydratic soils on the property itself. I've talked to our contractor who has farmed the land for a number of years in regards to the development of the property. He has assured me that he feels that the soils that are out there will be adequate in regards to the construction of the homes and their foundations and such out there. I don't know what type of soils in regards to what he's farming out there today and how he feels that those farmed fields will be adequate in regards to that versus what the big map from the government says in regards to those types of soils. They do have some level of accuracy, but at times they do have some points where they are a little bit less in regards to accurate. And the same thing happens when we go to looking at step systems and looking at step soils. Those maps are used as a guiding tool to help us determine roughly if the property has the value for looking at doing actual soils analysis on the site to determine if we have buildable soils for doing the step systems, as it is the same thing with hydratic soils and providing for whether or not they're actually buildable types of soils to put houses on them on that side. We'll also follow suit in regards to when we get to if we get to the site plan level, working with Mike in engineering to facilitate any of those pads that we still feel that need to have some engineered base on that side of it. And that side, from a foundation standpoint, we'll make certain we'll work towards making certain we provide the best suitable type of environment we can for each and every one of those buildable lots that we're looking at today on that side. So, but I'm available for any questions now or after the public hearing on that side. And I appreciate your time.
Any questions for the applicant at this time? Thank you. Stay close. This time I'll declare a public hearing open for item 19-A005 for Robert Stroop. Anyone wishing to speak, please come forward.
Good evening. My name is Michael Shirley. My wife and children and I live at 5089 Lytle Creek Road, so just 5 doors down from this property, although it's about a half a mile away. So we don't have a lot of neighbors out here. I have to begin by, because I promised my daughter that I would voice her opinion. She's 8 years old, and she said that she doesn't want all these neighbors. She wants the soybean fields. So I told her I would tell her that, but also we laid out the plans and we went through it as a family and looked at the site plan, and we talked about the importance of good, responsible growth, and so we talked through that. I know, judging from tonight's public opinions, you don't get a lot of people saying that they're in favor of something, but I'm actually in favor of a lot of things that are a part of this plan. As they're stated in there, I would like to see us with the number of units that we have. I know that by right they could probably put about 203 units in, but I would say it would be an ambitious plan to get the 132 or 132 or something that they're trying to get in, because it's wet out there. A couple of other things that I would say that we would really want to make sure are included in this for sure would be the shoulder improvements along the length of the property. It'll be about a mile and a quarter if my Strava app is accurate when we run down the road. It would be hard. We move a lot of hay down the road, and it's pretty narrow as is, but with this many people, if they're not accustomed to encountering tractors moving down the road, it would be nice to have the extra 8 feet of shoulder. I'm really happy to see that they included buried utilities, sidewalks on both sides. I personally wouldn't want to be a part of one, but having an HOA manage the property, also really in favor of that. And open space, as Mr. Mulchin mentioned, the amount of open space was something that we would like to see. A little concerned with the amount of properties that are bordering or their driveways empty onto Lytle Creek Road. I know that the driveways, if they can hold 2 cars, but if someone has a party I'm not sure where they're going to park their cars. Lytle Creek has no improved shoulders at all, and it's about 4-foot ditches. Every time we pave, we just keep adding on top of it, and if you go off the road, you're not getting back on. Either way, when you leave, wherever you leave this neighborhood, whether you go Lytle Creek north or south and hit Cedar Grove, we see cars stuck in the ditch quite often. And so at least for this entire length of improvement, we would definitely like to see those road improvements shoulders included in there. I was made aware of this by the signage that was placed on the side of the road, and I thought it was somebody advertising, work from home, weight loss deal, and we were going to stop and pick them up, and then saw that that was the zoning hearing. And so I called and spoke with Mr. Demasi and had a really good conversation with him, spoke with SEC Engineering as well, and most of my questions were answered, but I wanted to have them on the record so that I could at least say, I told you so, if people did move in, and there's some issues here that we definitely have. The drainage ditch that's in place right now that goes in front of lots 1 through 8 and then hits the man-made drainage way that's there. Currently, when in February and even just this past weekend, that drainage ditch overflows every time, and it crosses through lots 3, 4, and 5 and across the soybeans, and then runs into the drainage ditch about halfway down, maybe around lots 13 or 14. I know that we spoke with Mr. Mulchin. He said that they would fix that and make sure, but I was wondering how they were going to attach those driveways to Lytle Creek and make sure that the water could pass through there. The trailer that you see to the right of lot 1, they currently have 2, I'm going to say 3-foot culverts under their driveway, and the water crests over theirs quite often. So it's going to have to be some really good improvements there along that drainage way. The next thing that I was wanting to know as we read through the site plan was that the lighting for the neighborhood was going to be done in conjunction with Middle Tennessee Electric. Like I mentioned, we do not have very many neighbors out there. It's when we have people, we do church campouts and things, and people always talk about being able to, well, y'all have more stars out here. I'm like, no, it's the same amount of stars, you just get to see them. But I would like to see us be very stringent in whatever street lighting is put in out there. I'm not sure what the current, I wasn't able to get a hold of anyone at Middle Tennessee Electric. Mr. Pena might be able to offer some opinion there. I know we have new technology, maybe focusing more of those street lights down as much as possible, which would be really important to us. I know we have several farmers here on the commission. These are great soybean fields, but if you look at the above map, it's not on any of these pictures, but the one that you had right before I stepped up, there's several outcroppings where they're not farming. I know on lots on this section right here, lots 33, 34, 35, and going up to 64, 65, and 66. They don't farm that area. It gets really, really, really wet, and there's also some rock outcroppings right there. So I think that this is an ambitious plan, but I do appreciate the restrictions that they're self-imposing on there. Lots 21 and 22, there's currently a big sinkhole on 21, It fills up. It does not keep up with the drainage. It overflows into 22 and floods all the way to the road, or to the creek that goes underneath the road. That is a man-made, it's just wet weather, but WOTUS would say that you could run a kayak down it, I'm sure. So, in the plan, it says that a portion of this site lies within the 100-year floodplain, and really what you've got, and Ms. P mentioned too, you've got about 40 lots that are in the floodplain, and so I think you're going to have to use every bit of that green space to, as we said, rob Peter to pay Paul. I currently teach at Riverdale High School. I teach environmental and natural resource management, and I appreciate this plan because we were talking about soils, and then we discovered this plan and we went over it in class. We talked a lot about what do you do with water is a big thing. There's not a lot of drainage, and everything that's created here is man-made, and I do wonder if they're going to be able to get the step systems in place. But overall, we're okay with it. I don't have any real problems with it. I just wanted to go on record as saying that if we approve this, to please put in those restrictions that are mentioned in there. And one thing that would really be important to us is that if we do change, if engineering reveals any changes of a significant nature, as mentioned earlier tonight, that you please let us know, even though we're outside of the 500 feet. When you look at a neighborhood plan like this, it might be better to go to the next farm or 4 or 5 down the road and let us know. It's the same number of letters that you would send out in a more dense area. And because I think when I talked to Mr. DeMasi, he said that they had a neighborhood meeting and no one showed up. Well, there's not many of us out here. We could have done it at my kitchen table, but just maybe reach out a little bit more. And if at all possible, maybe the main reason that my son is in favor of this is that it gets internet so much closer to our house. So if we could figure out a way to make that a part of this plan, that would be great. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak for or against this rezoning request?
Good evening. My name's, I very rarely say this, but I feel obliged to tonight. My name is David Overall Huff. And I say the overall because I've heard it several times today. My grandfather on my mother's side was born on what's now known as Wilson Overall Road, which is just down the street from the property we're talking about. I'm a co-owner of the parcel immediately south, adjacent to the parcel that you're discussing here tonight, about a 75-acre parcel. I'm not, like the gentleman before me, I'm not here advocating necessarily for or against, but I just wanted to put my 2 cents in that when the more final plans are put in place, I guess the thing that I'm most concerned about, and perhaps he was too, was drainage potential problems, because it is fairly flat in this area, and we want obviously to maintain the uses that we have of our property as best we can. Other than that, I think, again, I think the proposal is an ambitious proposal, but I think if we can do it the best that it can be done, I think it would hopefully be a good thing for this area in the future. But I appreciate your time and courtesies. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing no one, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Commissioners?
To the gentleman's, Mr. Shirley's question about the lighting, that is strictly up to the developer. Middle Tennessee Electric does have several different options that can allow more lighting or less lighting, but that's up to the developer to make that choice. I would default back to them. So other than that, I feel good with this. I know there's some challenges, but I know Mike's going to take care of that for us. So with that said, Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve subject to all staff comments.
We have a motion and a second to approve item 19-A005 for Robert Stroop. Any other questions or comments?
I've got a comment or two. Knowing the area, knowing a little bit about the area, I think it's a whale of a challenge, both construction of the houses and drainage primarily. I did notice that we're crossing, the Mayo kiosk is on the, I guess, east side of Lytle Creek. Could you get a Mayo kiosk within that other spot? Maybe, I think lot 138, maybe.
Well, I made that suggestion to Mr. Mulchin because I even said if I live in lot 115, I said I'm not going to be real happy about having to drive all the way over to lot 137 to get my mail every day. Now,
I live in lot 39. I don't want to drive across.
I think
Lytle
Rob's, I think Mr. Mulchin, if it's okay, I think he may have additional information on that. I know the USPS. They're really getting to the point where they just want to see one kiosk for a development, regardless of how many homes or how it's structured or laid out. I think it's going to be a case where we're going to have to really sit down with the folks from the USPS and tell them sometimes it's just not practical to do it that way. But and Rob, is that pretty much what you were going to say? Yeah, that's pretty much what he's going to say. Apparently they're really pushing for just one kiosk for one development because that's less stops that their carrier has to make. I understand that, but sometimes it's the convenience for them. It seems like that's more important than the convenience for everybody else in the development. I don't know, because like I said, the person that lives in lot 115, to go get their mail every day is going to have to make a special trip all the way down like Mike is outlining right there. So from a centralized standpoint, it's probably the best place you can put it. But that's something I think that can be revisited. Even if it's not approved as part of this plan, if they were to say, okay, yeah, we'll let you have another kiosk, I'm sure we could probably fit another one in here, that would be a minor amendment to the plan. I wouldn't require that to come all the way back through just for the addition of a mail kiosk. And I think...
Doug, sorry, Mike. I have a couple of questions here. The first one I hope is pretty easy. Here and on page 14 of the plan, it says minimum building setbacks internal to the site, 35 feet from right-of-way, which is fine, but is there an external to the site setback, or is there something different than that 35 foot anywhere on the site?
No, it'd be 35 foot along the front. Where is he? Is this the page you're talking about, Mr. Everwater?
Yes, it is. Right
okay,
under
14,
that.
You said.
It says minimum building setbacks internal to the site.
I think they're referring to the lots actually inside, not along, well, I tell you what, could Mr. Mulchin come back up to explain?
Sure.
I think I know what it means, but I'd rather hear it from him than me try to assume what he means.
Don't understand the question.
Yeah, Mr. Everwater, the diagram that you see on there is more or less universal throughout in regards to the 35-foot front setback for the homes. So it says internal to the site. It's really meaning that we're just talking about to the project itself that we're talking about on that side. The uniqueness of this is that Lytle Creek functions somewhat as a actual drive in our own subdivision. So if you had a subdivision that was on a contiguous piece of land, unlike this one, you'd say, hey, everything's internalized to the site on that side. So every lot in here has a minimum 35-foot front setback. That allows for us to meet the requirements of what CUD requires from the standpoint of their box structures for the step system boxes and water systems on that side. So we have to meet those minimum standards on that side. So that's where we go to that 35-foot. So it says internal to the site, but in a context of dealing with normal property, it's usually inside one piece of land, but here we're dealing with 3 different tracks, more or less, that are kind of combined into one project.
Okay, thank you. My next question, Mike, is going to be for Mike and maybe Greg Brooks. Since we're building on both sides of the road, this plan says that Lytle Creek will remain in its current condition, Lytle Creek Road. It's going to be a lot of construction activity running back and forth and cutting utilities and whatnot. I mean, who's going to be responsible for putting that road back into equal or better condition?
What we normally do, we help the highway department establish a road connection and performance agreement that protects the road, looks at it at its current state, and if any damages occurs during construction, the developer is responsible for fixing that, or we'll cash in the surety that we require for it as well. So there'll be an internal surety for the development of the roads, the new roads, and then also one for the existing road network.
And if I can speak to the mailbox while I'm still up here, we have, as a development community, have to climb this very big mountain we have in front of us in regards to the Postal Service, and they're the gorilla, and we're the little guy in the corner that has no opportunity to speak. We have had numerous meetings, not only people in my office, but other offices that we deal with in regards to speaking with the Postal Service in Nashville. The mail kiosks that we've been asked to do, we originally thought would be more flexible, but they are not. They are relegating every one development, one mailbox location. And I do agree, and this is one of the things that we talked about when we had this plan came through prior to this is the second iteration of this PUD. When it came through originally, we didn't have this. It was all mailboxes at the end of the driveways. When we came back, we thought, okay, well, good. We'll have a mailbox on this side, a mailbox here, and a mailbox here. Well, no, USPS now speaks to the favor of only one box per location. So you may have some projects that maybe 1,500 homes or more that are strewn around the country that are going to have one postal office, which if you think about the size and the comparison of what it takes to make one of those boxes, in some developments that could be 15 or 2,000 units. You're talking about building a mini post office with P.O. boxes is what it comes down to. So it's no longer on the USPS's dime to pay for a post office, a P.O. box location. It's now up to the developer to create that location. So, I mean, you talk about development that could be 15 to 2,000 homes. You're talking about a 50 by 50 foot structure just to house the boxes alone, let alone the roof to go over it. So, I mean, it's a challenge for all of us in the development community to try to figure this out. And I know we've spoken from the developer standpoint of how to take care of this, but we don't get much relief from that standpoint. We're hoping that we can get Doug and the other municipalities to get together as a group effort and maybe have a sit down with the Nashville-based office and try to figure out if there's some way that they can make compromises for certain developments, whether they're small ones like this where you're spread out and you want to have multiple mailboxes, or even large large developments where you have a large amount of homes that you don't want to stick it all in one place, because it then comes down to how do you handle the traffic flow that goes into that. If you're talking 1,500 homes and you've got 1,500 people, or double the cars, 3,000 cars coming home from work every day to one postalized centralized location, I might as well wait till midnight to go get my mail because you won't be able to get to it when you get home from work. So I hope that we can make a charge as a community and have our municipalities work towards getting a better answer from the USPS to come up with a better solution than just saying every development can only have one box. So I appreciate your time.
Okay, hey, Rob. To help dry the soil out, a roadside ditch section, although not favorable in these days because you have to keep reworking the ditches, it might help to dry the soil out if we had open roadside ditches. But your plan calls for, curb and gutter throughout. Could we make that part of the development, part of the construction plans review, to see if we can get those to work? I mean,
I think we're open from the development side of anything that's possible to make the project work better for everybody involved, whether it be the community or...
It's going to be a challenge either way. I mean, as flat as it is, it's going to be tough to get those ditches to flow at any kind of slope. But if we have an open ditch, that helps the soil dry out.
And I know Mr. Shirley and I talked this afternoon in regards to the ditch section along those first 8 lots and how the neighbor next door has a significant size set of, drainage tubes going across the driveway. And I told him, I said, well, and he talked about being one location there where it kind of clogs up and the water then backflows and spills back across the farmland heading back towards those man-made ditches that we would be doing as part of the shoulder portion of that. We'd have to redig the ditches anyways in order to make that happen. And so what we've had, and then we'll also have to be putting culverts in there for the driveways to cross those as well. So, I mean, that's just part of the developments that if we need to expand upon that throughout the rest of the development, it's definitely something we're open to working with you on and making that happen, so.
And the reason Mike brings that up is because on, they're showing curb and gutter on that. You might just want to, for flexibility, at least, show that detail in there as well.
Okay, we'll add that to the poll.
I know this would be a lot of trouble. Anything you could do to rework it and get those lots that load off Lytle Creek Road, on a PUD, it looks like to me we're trying to get it internalized more. That would be part of our goal, particularly with some of these county roads we have.
I think Doug and I have talked about this in regards to that. I think the challenge is, like, especially on 1 through 8 with us backing up to the step soils in regards to that. We don't really have an avenue based on our minimum lot size to create another roadway structure behind that to do a double loaded road that's not on Lytle Creek. I think that we could look at potentially like the lots up maybe like 129 to 132, there might be a chance for us to fold those back into the neighborhood instead of them actually sitting out on Lytle Creek. So I think there is a potential for us to look at reworking at least those 4 lots from the standpoint of proposed roadway structure that's behind that, we can take and flip those around and have them back up to Lotto Creek. More or less take that roadway that's over there by 103, 104, 124 and move that over one lot section closer to Lotto Creek and let those lots that are 129 through 132 actually back up to Lotto Creek and front onto our proposed roadway on that side. So that's something we'll have to take a look at potentially.
Maybe a cul-de-sac, a mini cul-de-sac right here on 76 through 80.
Yeah, I would add 76 through 80 to that as well.
Just right across here, you could do a little bubble.
Yeah, we'll take a look at some options on that. If that's considerable, a minor reworking between now and when we get to Board of Commissioners on that side.
Well, okay.
I don't want to derail my train right now.
Hey, we're going to move the road here. Hey, let's put a cul-de-sac here. I'm like, okay, guys, wait a minute. I mean, if you're okay with the reworking of that, if you make that as a contingent of approval, and as long as it's consistent with what we've talked about, I think I could live with that moving forward, as long as everybody here is okay with it. You know, the road network changing is why one of the planned developments came back that we considered earlier, the one Saddlewood. That's why that came back. Now, there was no discussion about any changes during the meeting at that one. I think we can make this work, you know, as long as everybody here is in agreement. That way, when it comes back and I can look at it and say, okay, that's what they were talking about, I can pull it forward to the Board of Commissioners and say, they've made the changes based on what the discussion at the Planning Commission, and they're consistent with that. So yeah, I'm okay with that. Now, if he comes back and it's completely reworked, yeah, he's coming back here. But if you're okay with those changes that he's talking about, I think we can still move it forward.
Those were all subject, the motion was subject to staff comments. Does that cover it?
I'd say staff comments in our discussion, because that wasn't really one of our comments. Staff comments in the discussion we had today, I think would be appropriate.
Question. If you go open ditch, you lose your sidewalks.
That's the one trade-off where we have to figure out how we manage that in regards to the aesthetics of the neighborhoods. If we go to open ditches, we lose the sidewalks. So, I mean,
which is a huge aesthetic give up. So I would be against that unless it was just, well, I don't know. I'd just be against it, period. I like the curb and gutter, and I think the sidewalks are an important part of the project. But anyway, two more quick questions. Doug and Josh, Mike and Josh. Every drop of water that lands on this site has to stay on this site, correct?
No, it has to be managed.
Has to be managed?
Yes.
Before it can gently run off?
Yes.
All right.
We can't run more water off onto the neighbors than what's leaving the site historically.
Okay, which leads to my next question. If you build a 3-foot tall dike all the way around that one side to build up for foundations to get out of the floodplain, how are you not going to impact your neighbors?
That's for them to figure out.
Is it not against the law to impact your neighbor's property that way? And
That's what I'm saying. It's going to be a challenge. Where they are filling in the floodplain, they have to compensate cut somewhere else. And that we... Yes. So when it spills out its banks, it's got a place to go and doesn't go upstream or impact downstream either way. Right. And like I said, with the detention pond in that floodplain, our rule is that it's got to function with Lotto Creek at the flood stage. So it can't push water out when the water's holding it behind it. So it's going to be a challenge.
You said we can't put more water off than running off now. Within what a scope of what type of rain event? 10 inches in 24 hours?
We have to detain.
What?
Our regulations say we have to detain the 2, the 5, the 10, the 25, and 50-year storm events and control the 100 through an emergency spillway or anything above the 50-year storm event. So we have to hold all of those storms back in a stormwater management area, usually a detention pond, and release it at pre-development rates. So they over-excavate an area and then let it off at pre-development rates.
Say our regs or federal EPA regs?
Our regs. But we use the Metro Nashville Stormwater Management Manual for water quality and whatnot on top of that. That's what I say. It's not impossible. It's just going to be a challenge.
It's going to make our engineers work really hard.
I do think, based on, and I think this plan came up about the time I came on Planning Commission about 10 years ago, the original plan, not this plan, but the plan for this property. And I think this is probably more manageable than that was to accomplish what you need to accomplish.
And your point, Mr. Vaught, is the fact that the plan that it was part of your package tonight from 2006 had pretty much every piece of this land covered by a road or a lot aside from the step system. So I mean, by consolidating it from the RS-15 to the more like an R10 type of categorization, we were able to open up that open space to allow us to give us that room to work the the grading and drainage out on that side versus the plan. Like Mike and Doug said, I mean, the original plan from 2006 was a very ambitious plan at that point in time, and those are I think, stormwater management requirements at that point in time when that came through. So, that's why they were able to build edge to edge with houses and lots, because there was no requirements in regards to, to stormwater management versus how it is today, where we have to worry about those kinds of things. And based on, in light of the situations we've seen in the past, since 2010 and on, we've seen more and more situations, as we've talked about tonight, more of these things being taken care of. And as an engineering community, I know Mike and, our engineers and other engineers in the area have to work very hard to come up with solutions for what we're presenting today, but now seeing things that we did in the past that we're having to figure out how to rectify those situations in the past when we weren't required to do those things. So
Rob is correct. With the Blue Line Stream, Blue Line River, Creek, and waterways adjacent to the site, our old rules, just let it roll. No detention.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to make sure my motion's clear, and the second behind me that I, subject staff comments is the discussion we've just had, and I'm okay with the looking at eliminating 129 through 132 and also 76 through 80, at least from a standpoint of adding a street or something, within that. Anything outside of that, I'd like to see it come back through, but I'm comfortable with making that recommendation, considering this is a challenge in itself. So,
thank you.
Who seconded that? Is that okay?
I just wanted to reinforce that comment. I feel really strongly about not having this many access points on Lytle. So whatever you can do to minimize that, I'm going to be looking for that at the commission meeting.
yeah, we'll take it under consideration. We're going to do our best to move them off.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Any other questions? Mike, you're the one that said you weren't going to speak tonight because you got to go to Knoxville.
I know. I got to go to Knoxville.
I'm not sure I'm going to recognize you. I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
Some properties are probably left being a soybean field. But you know what? Mr. Stroop has a right just like everybody else has a right.
Right.
I'm going to certainly vote in favor of him to exercise his right to develop. But man, I would like to be the engineer on this project because fees are going to be extraordinary.
Other questions, other comments? Ready to vote? We have a motion and a second to approve item 19-A005 for Robert Stroop. All those in favor of that motion to approve, please say aye. Any opposition? Motion to approve carries. Thank you. Let me just make one particular comment. Robert Stroop has been a pillar to this community for as long as I can remember, and I can remember a long time. And if there's anyone that will develop that site according to whatever standards are set in front of him, Robert will do that. Thank you, Robert, for
It's past mine too.
Robert was a member of this commission for years and years. Thank you for your service, Robert. Item 6A7, amendments to Section 404A of the zoning ordinance, variable lot size and infrastructure to the RL zone.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. This is in furtherance of the discussion we had at our last meeting regarding variable lot size in the RL zone. You'll recall that we talked about lot sizes in the RL can be reduced to 15,000 square feet, which is a typical RM minimum, if public sanitary sewer or a decentralized sewer system, step system with sufficient capacity is determined by the sewer provider, and adequate water services available for domestic service and as determined by the water provider, and fire protection as determined by the fire chief. Some of these requirements, specifically lot width and lot coverage for residential uses, are different between the RM and the RL zone. You'll see on that's the last page of your agenda packets, you'll see how I've bolded the differences between the two. Staff would like to clarify that if a development meets the criteria of 404A1, which is what I just read, those A and B just above that the development would be able to be built to the RM standards, not just the minimum lot size. And you'll see the amended regulations below, really, instead of saying lot size may be reduced to 15,000 square feet, we just say bulk regulations for the RM zone as shown in Table 1 may be used, provided and A and B stay the same. So that clarifies it, and that issue with the lot width at that point is resolved. So that would be our recommendation, and we just need to have a public hearing for that to move that forward.
Questions for staff? Not, I'll declare a public hearing open for amendments to Section 404A of our zoning ordinance. Anyone wishing to speak?
Sit down, Rob. No.
Seeing no one, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Commissioners? We have a motion to approve amendments to Section 404A of the zoning ordinance. Any other questions? All those in favor of that motion to approve, please say aye. Is there any opposition? Motion to approve carries. Thank you. All of these rezoning requests are scheduled to be heard before the full county commission on Thursday, April the 11th. It'll start at 6:30 p.m. here in this courtroom. Sure. All 7 of them.
I got one quick question for Doug. I know I hated to vote against the application on Old Nashville Highway, and I hated, I was torn there. And despite what my wife and children think, I occasionally do something on emotion. That was more historical emotion than it was practical planning. But my question to you is, do we have a vehicle in the zoning to apply an historical overlay district? And I think what I really regretted and was voting for the initial commercial thing out there at that time, thinking it was good and not knowing the historical significance of that area to certain people in the community and the community as a whole. So do we have any vehicle for that? I don't remember one.
Well, we don't have any kind of an historical overlay or anything that's dictated in our ordinance. Now, that's something we could always look at. Now, I'll put this caveat in there. Depending on what you're talking about with a historic zone, we're not allowed to do, as a county, we're not allowed to do anything like design review or anything like that. We couldn't say, hey, yeah, we want to see what you're going to propose, but it has to be built so much brick stone, it has to be built this kind of architecture, that kind of thing. We don't have that authority to do that. Now, maybe possibly we can look at some other things, but we're very limited in what we can require in something like that.
Thinking more of a request from a certain area or a group of people, a group of landowners in an area. I don't know that you want to go there or not, but it just triggered that.
Well, and like I said, the vehicle of the zoning ordinance can be used for that. We had even talked about, if we had, more planners and more time, about doing small area plans around like your Christianas, your Miltons, Las Casas, those kind of things. Those kind of things just take a lot of time and effort. And when you've got a staff of 3 planners and as busy as we are, trying to do some of the long-range planning things sometimes has to take a backseat to the things that are coming in daily, as far as site plans and plat review, as far as the calls and the walk-ins. I mean, the last 3 or 4 years, we really haven't had a whole lot of time for long-range activities.
I wish there were 3 engineers in the county.
There are, they just don't work here.
Work here, yeah.
Doug, any other business?
Well,
or
it's late, so I'm only going to talk about a half a dozen other things. I'm kidding. No, I don't have anything further. Okay, I thought it was funny. I guess not. Tough crowd.
Anyone have anything? Our next meeting is scheduled for Monday, the 25th of this month. It'll be at 9 a.m. in the planning mess. And for those of you that haven't heard yet, the gentleman sitting our farthest to my right, Josh McCrary, has announced his resignation with the county, and I as one, and I think I'm speaking for most every member of the staff and most every planning commissioner, Josh will be missed sorely and will be very hard to replace. But Josh, we wish you well in your new assignment. If you guys will remember, this planning commission passed a resolution of appreciation to Josh probably about a year ago, and we embarrassed him, but I don't want to embarrass him tonight. But I will say that there's just not been a time when Josh has not responded in a timely manner and has given outstanding advice, and once again, he'll be missed. But life goes on. And I just wanted to let everyone know that Josh is moving on. And congratulations, Josh, and good luck in your new endeavors. Anyone else have anything? Thank you for your time, your attendance, your patience, and your participation. We are adjourned.